Hi, I'm Ben Solomon. Today is December 17th, 2021, and I am going to talk about critical race theory, otherwise known as CRT. Okay, what is CRT? CRT stands for critical race theory. First, I want to talk about political correctness because it bears some effect on how CRT is being imposed in the United States today. Political correctness is a Marxist-Leninist invention that appeared soon after the Russian Revolution of 1970. Basically, it means adherence to the policies and the principles of the party line, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Political correctness is actually a means to censor the masses and impose a certain point of view. When you censor the masses, what happens? We can ask ourselves, where is the Soviet Union now? We should replace political correctness with diplomacy. It is much more sophisticated and it shows a genuine care for the other people that we are dealing with. Political correctness is a technique to silence others, a subtle censorship strategy. So you note that when censorship, any form of censorship becomes a mandate, there is a problem in the background. Like they say, there's no smoke without a fire. And political correctness is almost always used when you don't care about the other person. You want to shut them up or shout them down. So I spent some time tracing back the origins of critical race theory. It actually originates from Marxism. In 1848, Marx and Engels came out, published their Communist Manifesto, and between 1895 and 1905, Freud came up with psychoanalysis. So the Marxist-oriented critical theory is basically a combination of these two. So they have incorporated psychology into Marxism and rebranded it as critical theory. And then that evolved and rebranded as critical social theory. And then in the 50s and 60s, with the desegregation, with Martin Luther King, these academics saw what was happening, that Martin Luther King was trying to raise his people peacefully without the use of violence by making the general public aware that what was happening to his people was not correct. And so you can imagine the professors in critical social theory saying, we incorporated psychology, now we should incorporate race. And they started exchanging papers and writing and rewriting and doing all sorts of things, which academics do. And so in 1965, you get the normative version of the critical social theory. And then with Supreme Court precedents, there was another change. The law! Let's incorporate the legal arguments into critical social theory. And they did. And then they rebranded it as critical legal studies and in 1977. By 1989, it was rebranded again as critical race theory, but it's still Marxism. It's a race-based version of Marxism. And the main thesis of Marxism is that capitalism is state-managed. Yes, Marxism recognizes capitalism. They weren't that stupid, but it is who handles capitalism. Was it the individual, the private companies, or the government? And that is anathema to our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. What is worse is that it has permeated into other studies, communication studies, cultural studies, moral theory, law, linguistics, literary theory, philosophy, political science, religious studies, theology, sociology, and democratic theory. It's a poison that has taken away man's free will, taken away God, and replaced both with the state. And only the state can solve the problems. As the Soviet Union showed, only the state can solve the problems if it can last. And then this guy, Mike Gonzalez, with the Heritage Foundation, he stated 5 lies that are being propagated by those proponents of CRT. One is it's not taught in school. Wrong. There was in Virginia, there was a Black African American family, part of the PTA, that wanted to challenge what was being taught in schools. What happened? Merrick Garland, our US district attorney, labeled all parents as terrorists and got the FBI to investigate. Today, even though FBI is backtracked, today, if anybody, oh, my son doesn't like your son, I'm going to snitch on you and claim you are a domestic terrorist, FBI will investigate. So we are no longer safe as parents because that is now the accepted wisdom of the law. Parents are domestic terrorists. The next lie is CRT is just a way to give previously marginalized people the attention they have lacked. Wrong. The whole thing has been inverted. The political masters of CRT use marginalized people as a political tool. CRT is not Marxist. No, the foundation of CRT is Marxism. It's well documented in the literature. And I've shown you the history of the origins of CRT. It is well documented. Those opposed to CRT just don't want to teach history. Correction. Those who propose or enforce CRT want to rewrite history to fit their narrative. That's a very dangerous thing to do. And we have seen that happen in the US the last couple of years with the tearing down of statues, that sort of things. We need to know the mistakes our forefathers made so that we do not replace them. That's why those statues need to be up there. use of CRT is a cynical ploy of the Republicans. Nope, the Republicans do not want CRT or anything to do with that. The progressives are forcing CRT down our throats. And I believe that most moderate Democrats do not want to have anything to do with CRT. It's the progressives who are forcing CRT down our throats. And it's based on 4 claims. The first is that genetic studies refutes race. So there are 2 parts to the claim. First, that race is based on inherited physical and behavioral differences. And secondly, that science refuted race. The genetic studies of the 20th century refuted race as a science. This is wrong because in the early years of genetic studies, nobody understood race. They could not find what makes a specific race and not another type of race. And they therefore assumed there's no genetic differences between races. Wrong. Today, in the 21st century, you can do ancestry DNA testing that tells you which race you belong to, or which group of races exist in your blood. Irish, British, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Indian, Chinese. They can tell from the DNA which race you belong to. So this statement is false. And the people who promote CRT have chosen not to update their scientific statements. The second claim is that racism is normal in the US. That is wrong. In which country did white brother fight white brother to give his black brother freedom? Remember, there was a study that showed that African Americans or blacks have between 20 to 80% white blood. So they are brothers and sisters, they are cousins. So which country did white brother fight white brother to give his black brother freedom? Only the US. There has not been any country before or since where brother fought brother to give another brother freedom. The fourth claim that is false is interest convergence or material determinism. That basically means a group of people to serve the interests of dominant white groups. You know, if you live in any country in the world, you will always find a dominant race, group of people in a specific race that manipulates or manages the others to serve them. It's money that does it. Are you going to say, oh, he's a rich man, I'm not going to work for him, even though he pays better than the poor man down the road? No, it's not manipulation. It's greed from both sides. It's the corruption of the human spirit. It is not some fancy term that sounds academically great. Interest convergence. Wow, got a new term, material determinism. We got a new term. Let's write a few more papers. After all, we are judged as academics, we are judged by the number of papers we write. So a professor who writes 1 paper a year is not as good as a professor who writes 10 papers a year. That's how academia works. Even though those 10 papers may be entirely rubbish, that's how academia works. Oh, yeah. The fourth claim, differential racialization, that minorities are attributed various negative stereotypes. Also a false claim. It's a nonsense from a narrow selective view of history. This is parochialism. People living within their own confines, within 5 miles of each other, and everybody on the other side, 10 miles away, is somebody else. If you look at American history, you know other whites were treated badly, the Irish and the non-wars. What we see is that it took a while for the existing US population to accommodate the newcomers. And it also took a while for the newcomers to let go of their past cultural attributes and assimilate and adopt the American way of doing things. Because they did that because they wanted to be Americans. So differential racialization is not right. I remember some years ago, I was doing a little bit of Uber, and I was called. This guy called me up. Hey, the police want me to get a ride to back to my home. Can you pick me up? I said, okay. I arrived there. There were 2 Nigerians and 3 police cars. The driver was completely drunk, and his passenger was the one who called me. I got him on board, and I started to drive to his home. And you know what's the first thing he told me? Look at these police. You know, they think we are black, and so they have stopped us. I said, wait a minute. Do you know how the police know? This is middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning. Do you know how the police know that there's a drunk driver in the car? He said, no, because drunk drivers cannot drive straight. They will weave back and forth. Sometimes they'll go off lane and come back in. And look at that car. Can you see who the driver is? No. So if you cannot see who the driver is on that car, how do you think the police are going to be able to know that you're a black guy in a black car at night, 2 o'clock in the morning? So there's a lot of urban myths, put it nicely, that's floating out there that are completely false. Okay, CRT, recapping, CRT is race-based Marxism. Marxism is state planning. You have no control over your life. The state tells you what you can and cannot do and how much money you can earn. So if you want to earn more, you have to bribe the state official who is responsible for your pay you more. And from there, we get universal income. Because it has to be universal income because nobody else is creating the wealth. It's only the state that is allowed to do so. And Marxism was basically white people's politics to replace feudalism when feudalism came in conflict with the industrialization. And so a lot of the business owners, really wealthy business owners, with fresh experience, with early experience about feudalism, behaved like feudal kings themselves. And so Marxism came about to reject that way of thinking. But give it time, society evolves, goes through all these birth pains to become better. You have to give it the time. And CRT has its origins in Marxism. Specifically, race was introduced during the time of Martin Luther King's address. So which would you choose? In America, where free spirit, free minds, and free enterprise has held sway for 250 years, or Soviet Russia, where Marxism could not last even 70 years. So you must ask the question, why do our academics try to impose a failed system on us? Why? Thank you so much, and have a great time thinking about these things.